Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to begin a multi-part series here that I think, and I know I say this every week, I think is vital to where we're going, and I guess it's good that I say that every week because everything I should be teaching hopefully is something that is vital, to something that you need, that you can chew on and be useful to you and take with you, and that will impact your walk in some profound way. And so I try to be submissive to what the Father has to bring to the body. And so what we're going to talk about now is what I consider the heart of the matter. As a matter of fact, literally, we're going to talk about the heart, which is the heart of the matter. And the Hebrew word there is lev, and we're going to be talking about your lev, your heart. So let's begin in Devarim chapter 6 and in verse 1 in Deuteronomy. In Devarim chapter 6 and in verse 1. Now we're going to go very slowly through this. We're going to take our time over the next couple of weeks, and we're going to really focus on understanding how the heart is a part of this puzzle. Where your heart's at, where his heart's at, how they're supposed to come into synchronization with each other, and how the heart issues are really at the heart of the matter. They are the issues that are at the heart, literally, or the center of our struggles in walking this thing out. And so I want us to really get a clear, specific understanding of what Scripture says about our heart and how it needs to be focused and how it comes into play. So Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 1. Chapter 6 and in verse 1. And this is the command, the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh your Elohim to guard all his laws and his commands which I command you, you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, and that your days be prolonged. And you shall hear, O Yisrael, and shall guard to do, that it might be well with you, and that you increase greatly as Yahweh your Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. So now, let's take the physical metaphor to the spiritual before we continue here and realize these are instructions he's saying that they were supposed to understand so that it will go well with them and their days will be prolonged in the land. The physical land as a metaphor for the kingdom or the spiritual land. And so these things will apply in that way, the physical metaphor for the spiritual. And he says, with the Shema here in verse 4, which is one of the most famous verses of all of Scripture, both in Judaism and throughout the believing body, Shema Yisrael, hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words, which I am commanding you today, shall be in your heart. So this is our first indication about the heart. And actually, interestingly enough, this is the first place we find an instruction to love Yahweh, and it's to be with all of our heart. It wasn't in Bereshit in Genesis. It wasn't in Shemot in Exodus. It wasn't in Leviticus or Numbers, Vayikra or Bamidbar. The first instruction to love Yahweh comes here in Devarim, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, and in verse 5. And you shall love Yahweh Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. That doesn't leave very much out. As a matter of fact, it leaves nothing out. In other words, you are to love him with everything. And he says, and these words, which I am commanding you today, shall be in your heart. What words? The words of the Torah. The instructions of the Almighty are to be where? In your heart. And then, because you have them in your heart and you're embracing them with all your strength and with all your might, with all your being, you are to impress them, which means to actually make an impression on them, to push them into your children, so to speak. And those of you with children know that sometimes it feels like that's what you're trying to do, to just push them into the children, because they don't go in easily. And we are just like that. Do you ever feel like the Father looks down at you as a child of the living Elohim and feels like he has to kind of push these things into you because you don't receive it very smoothly and easily? We're hard-headed, we're stiff-necked. He says, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So this is the most famous set of Scripture. It's the Shema, followed by the Ve'ahavta, where it says, and you shall love Yahweh, your Elohim, with all your heart. And so this is the heart of the matter. This is where it begins. The Torah, the instructions of the Almighty, is supposed to be something that we have written on our heart. And so that's really where it begins. The question is, are we going to participate in allowing it to happen? Because he's not going to actually like surgically take your heart out and write it on there and then put it back in. You actually have a participating role in this, that you have to allow for it. You have to desire it so that you allow him to write on your heart. Let's continue now in chapter 10 of Deuteronomy and verse 12. Those of you who are familiar with listening to me teach will know that we're going through some of my favorite sections of Scripture here. We're going to go to Deuteronomy 10:12 and eventually to Deuteronomy 8:2. And so we'll have covered the primary foundational verses for the ministry that we do. But now go to chapter 10 and in verse 12 of Devarim, of Deuteronomy. And now, Yisrael, what is Yahweh your Elohim asking of you? I always like to point out, isn't that a great question? If we believe ourselves to be Israel, the primary question then becomes, what is it that's required of us? What does he require of us? What is he asking of us? And he lays it out very simply. But to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways and to love him, and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with what? With all your heart and with all your being, to guard the commands of Yahweh and his laws which I command you today, which, by the way, are for your good. Before we continue, let's look at this now. First, we were told in chapter 6 that we were to have the law, the Torah, the instructions written on our heart, and we were supposed to love him with all our heart. Now we're told we need to serve him with all our heart. See, if you already love him with all your heart, then that has to now take action. What does it look like to love him with all your heart? We become servants of the Most High. So now we want to serve him with all our heart. Continuing in verse 14. See, the heavens and the heaven of heavens belong to Yahweh your Elohim, also the earth with all that is in it. Yahweh delighted only in your fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you above all peoples, as it is today. And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart and harden your neck no more. Let's stop there for a second. Circumcision of heart was always required. It's not a new concept that people will tell you came in the New Testament, because you're reading it right now in Deuteronomy chapter 10. It was always a requirement to circumcise your heart as well as your flesh. There was no dispensationalist kind of opportunity here where that was circumcision of the flesh and now we have circumcision of heart. No, it was always both. Okay, I hope we can agree on that now that we just read the verse. He says, you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, and there's another part of it, and harden your neck no longer, no more. We are stiff-necked, we are hard-necked, we are hard-headed. And the problem is connected to the heart. There's a heart issue that causes us to be stiff-necked. There's a heart issue, and we're going to address that and kind of dig into that throughout the next couple of weeks of teachings, is understanding where that connection is. What is it about our heart that causes us to be stiff-necked and hard-headed? Verse 17. For Yahweh your Elohim is Elohim of mighty ones, master of masters, the great El, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality nor takes a bribe. He executes right ruling for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the stranger, giving him food and a garment. And you shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. Fear Yahweh your Elohim, serve him and cling to him, and swear by his name. He is your praise, and he is your Elohim, who has done for you these great and awesome deeds, which your eyes have seen. Your fathers went down to Mitzrayim with 70 beings, and now Yahweh Elohim has made you as numerous as the stars of the heavens. The reason I read you the rest of that section is because we're going to start reading here lots of verses as they came out of Egypt. And as they came out of Egypt, there were signs and wonders that were done. And they were supposed to never forget that A, they were slaves and oppressed, and B, that their slavery was broken as they were redeemed and set free and delivered by the Almighty. And the third thing being that the signs and wonders were to bring them closer to, in their awe and wonder and fear of the Almighty. See, these things, as Paul will tell us, were written as examples for you, for us. And so we are to never forget that if our ancestors hadn't come out of Egypt, we still could be in Egypt. And so we are supposed to always think about, and this is something that they talk about at a traditional Jewish Seder or Passover Seder, is that do not forget and always think of it as if you yourself was brought forth from Egypt. not just reading the story about how they were brought forth from Egypt. And so there's an important part of this to realize there's a connectivity here where he says, you need to remember and understand that you shall love the stranger because you were strangers in the land. See, there's a relationship. Don't forget where you came from. You were them. You know what it says? But for the grace of the Almighty, that would be me. Well, guess what? That's true. That's a very true statement, if there's such a thing as very true. Okay, that is a fact. But for the grace of the Almighty, that could be you. And so we are to understand where we came from. So why is it that people find circumcising the foreskin of their heart, walking in all his ways, serving him with all their heart, loving him with all their heart, having these things written on their heart, why is it that people find this so difficult? I believe that we will find the answer has something to do with the fact that loving Yahweh with all your heart requires obedience and submission to all of Yahweh's commandments, statutes, and ordinances, and the reality that our heart, the heart of man, is not cooperative in this effort. See, that's the problem right there. You want to get to the heart of the matter? That's it. We have a sovereignty problem. We need to get off the throne, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit when we get to Exodus, when we get to Shemot. You see, the king, that's you, sitting on your throne, doesn't want to be obedient. I'm the king. I don't have to listen to anybody. Doesn't want to be submissive. I'm the king. Everybody needs to do it my way. You don't want to be submissive. The king has got to die so that the king can live. King Yeshua, on your throne. Now he lives, and he's sitting on the throne. He's sitting at the right hand of the Father, and he's going to be on the throne. But are you going to let him sit on your throne? Because you don't have to let him do that. He's not going to force his way in. He appeals to you and says, please, let me rule and reign. I will bless you. I will protect you. It's in your best interest. But we have a problem with sovereignty, self-sovereignty, that is, and we don't want to get off the throne. And so we have control over our heart, and we want to listen to our heart, but the heart in man, the heart that's just sort of initially in there, that's allowed to just do whatever it wants with our emotions and the thoughts in man and the spirit in man and the enemies talking in our head, that heart is problematic. Let's read Yirmiyahu. Jeremiah chapter 17. See, that heart is problematic. The heart by default has issues. And aren't we blessed that Scripture tells us exactly what it's all about here in Yirmiyahu? The Father leads us to Yirmiyahu chapter 17 and in verse 7. Blessed is the man who trusts in Yahweh and whose trust is Yahweh. See, if you're still sitting on the throne, do you truly trust Yahweh? No, I don't think so. He said, for he shall be like a tree planted by the waters, which spreads out its roots by the river and does not see when heat comes. And his leaf shall be green, and in the year of drought he is not anxious, nor does he cease from yielding fruit. The heart is crooked above all and desperately sick. Who shall know it? Is there any ambiguousness about that? Is that gray? I think it's pretty black and white. The heart is crooked above all and desperately sick. Who shall know it? I, Yahweh, search the heart. I try the kidneys and give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds. See, Yahweh's going to test your heart. And he's going to dig in and see what you really want. What is it that's your desire? See, the kidneys, the heart, is all about what you desire. He says the heart is the metaphorical seat of our emotions and desires. It's these emotions and desires that lead to the actions we take, whether evil or good. If not controlled or left unchecked, they will form a veil before your eyes and cloud your mind, which will in turn greatly affect the decisions that you make. This is the nature of the heart. This is the nature of the emotions, the desires that are encompassed in the metaphor of the heart. Now we know physically the heart's pumping blood and doing those things, but what it's also doing is it's filling you and pumping your desires and your emotions throughout your body and filling your mind with all that. And so on the one hand, we can understand why he calls it desperately sick and crooked above all. Let's go to Matityahu, Matthew chapter 12. Matthew chapter 12 and verse 34. Brood of adders, how are you able to speak what is good, being wicked? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. The good man brings forth what is good from the good treasures of his heart, and the wicked man brings forth what is wicked from the wicked treasure. And I say to you that for every idle word men speak, they shall be given an account of it in the day of judgment. For by your words you shall be declared righteous, and by your words you shall be declared unrighteous. You see, righteousness is not just something that's imputed to you, as has been said many times by some people out there. He says very clearly here, your words will be one of the things that affects you being declared righteous or not. Unless we think that verse is unclear. For by your words you shall be declared righteous, and by your words you shall be declared unrighteous. Does that maybe put a little extra fear and trembling every time we open our mouth? It should. And we could do a whole long series of teachings just on the lips, the words, the mouth, the tongue. And maybe we will, but not today. Deuteronomy chapter 8 and in verse 1. Deuteronomy chapter 8 and in verse 1. What did we read in Jeremiah? He said that I will test your heart and prove your kidneys, right? Well, listen to what he says in Deuteronomy 8 and in verse 1. Guard to do every command which I command you today, that you might live and shall increase and go in and shall possess the land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, to prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. So again, we start out with the metaphor for the kingdom. Right? He said, look, you're about to go in and possess the land. He says, but before doing that, just remember where you came from. You came from the world. Egypt and Mitzrayim being a metaphor for the world. He said, and he led you through this wilderness of the world for a purpose. To humble you is the first purpose. If you are the king still sitting on your throne, I don't think you've been humbled yet. It takes humility to get off the throne and get on your knees and let the king sit on his throne. He says, so I led you through the wilderness to humble you, to prove you, to test you, in other words, to know what? To know what is in your heart, whether or not it's in your heart to keep the commandments or not. It does not say here whether or not you would do it perfectly. It's simply saying whether or not you would try. Whether it's in your heart to want to do it perfectly. Whether it's in your heart to make the effort to do it perfectly. Because if it's in your heart to want to try to, then when you fail, you get on your knees and you repent. And you say, Father, I failed. Forgive me. Give me strength to try again and do it again. And do it again. And do it again. Until we get it right. And you'll get some of it right that you weren't getting right. And then you'll be challenged by something else. And you realize you have some other area now that you have to get right. Because there's no piece of this that you can't do. And some pieces of it are going to be very easy for you and hard for me. And easy for me and hard for you. And easy for the next person and hard for... Everybody is in a different place in this. In other words, your issues are your issues, my issues are my issues. And so sometimes we scratch our head and we say, I don't know why you're struggling with that. Well, because it's not your issue. But the issue that's your issue, I may scratch my head and wonder why you're struggling with it. And we have to respect that. But he's testing us to prove us, to see whether it's in our heart to keep his commandments. And that's the key. Are we willing to get off the throne and submit and obey? Remember, we went back to obedience and submission. He's testing to see if we're willing to be obedient and submit to him. In this teaching series, we're going to go ahead and develop a greater understanding of the heart of man and the heart of Yahweh as we make an effort to get to the heart of the matter. Now, what I want to do as we go through this, we did this once before in another teaching, and some people really liked it, so we're going to do that this time too. We're going to start in Bereshit, in Genesis, and just go straight through. Now, occasionally we may make a skip and a jump here or there and get back, but primarily we're going to go just so-called chronologically through the books and read what it has to say about the heart issue. So let's go to Bereshit, to Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5. And we're just going to stop each teaching wherever the clock tells me to stop, because we're going to take this through for the next couple of weeks. Bereshit chapter 6 and in verse 5. And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yahweh was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. So when we do evil, or we focus on our desires, the things that don't match up with his desires, it grieves his heart. Do you want to make your heavenly Father grieved in his heart? No, of course not. Well, we have to understand what grieves his heart. Well, when our heart doesn't match his heart, it grieves his heart. And notice what he says here. He says he saw the wickedness of men was great in the earth. And what made this wickedness so great? Because man was focused doing every inclination of the thoughts of his heart. So now we're ascribing a mind to this thing called the heart. The thoughts, the desires of the heart. See, these things start in the heart, in our emotional center, and they end up in our head. And we can all argue about where the thought process and consciousness, how that all seats itself, and mechanically how science will tell us and everything else. But our desires birth into thoughts, which birth into actions. Our motivations push the thoughts in our head, which lead to the actions we take. And apparently, every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was on evil continually. Let's understand again what scriptural definition of evil. Evil is, but not limited to, what we normally think, like murder, raping, pillaging, pedophiles, adultery. I mean, whatever you normally think of as evil. But breaking any of the laws of Torah, anything that's an instruction of Yahweh is evil. Okay? We have to understand that that's very important. That includes all of the instructions, like feast keeping, Sabbath keeping, what you put in your mouth as far as the food that you eat. These are all things that if you do against what he says, or if you go against what he says, it is evil. I think sometimes we only have a definition of evil as like a mass murdering psychopath. Now clearly that's evil, don't get me wrong. But it's not limited to the overt sociopaths. Okay? Anything that goes against the teachings and instructions that were set in the universe that the Almighty placed there to bless you, to keep you safe, to change you from what you are into what he is, that's in his idea, in his mind, his definition, that's evil. So when he says here that there was great wickedness in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the heart was on evil continually, in other words, they wanted to do what they wanted to do, not what he wanted them to do. And let's get this straight also, even though I haven't proved it to you in other teachings yet, the Torah existed prior to the mountain at Mount Sinai. They had that instruction. They knew, they were taught. Otherwise, why would he say to Cain and Abel and say, look, he said, you know how to do this. If you'd done it right, you'd have been okay, but you did it wrong, but you knew better. We don't have any verse telling us that he instructed them on how to make an offering. But it's obvious from that verse that he did. That Cain knew. He just chose not to. He chose to do what he chose to do. By the way, that's evil. That's why Cain was in trouble. And he got scolded for wanting to do what he wanted to do and not wanting to do what Yahweh had said to do. And he didn't like being scolded. So rather than change to teshuvah, to repent, what did he do? He got mad at his brother for making it clear, by contrast, that his brother had done it right and he had done it wrong. And he felt like, you know what, if my brother had done it the way I had, I wouldn't have gotten in trouble. No, you still would have gotten in trouble, but both of you would have gotten in trouble. Anybody get that happening to you? That people that are doing things wrong, now that you're doing things according to Torah, they start lashing out and getting mad at you because actually you're making them look bad? Even though you're not trying to do that overtly. And they're not maybe even conscious of that, but in their mind they're thinking, if you're right, that means I'm wrong. And that means that then I have to fix something and change something, so I'm going to get mad at you for changing. I want you to do what I'm doing so that I don't have to have any kind of mirror held up to my face to make me feel like I'm wrong. Anybody experience any of that? Let's continue here. Let's go to Bereshit, to Genesis chapter 8, and in verse 20. Bereshit chapter 8 and verse 20. Genesis 8:20. And Noah built an ark to Yahweh and took every clean beast and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And Yahweh smelled a soothing fragrance, and Yahweh said in his heart, never again shall I curse the ground because of man, although the inclination of man's heart is evil from his youth, and never again smite all living creatures as I have done. So, here the Almighty is having a change in his heart and saying, you know what, I'm not going to do this again, even though man's heart is still the way it is. Even though man still going to go ahead from his youth and give into and act upon the desires, the inclinations of his heart, which is on evil continually, I'm not going to do this again. Let's go to chapter 17 and verse 15. Chapter 17 and in verse 15. And Elohim said to Avram, as for Sarah your wife, do not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I shall bless her and also give you a son by her, and I shall bless her, and she shall become nations. Sovereigns of peoples are to be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, is a child to be born to a man who's 100 years old? Or a Sarah who is 90 years old to bear a child? I mean, he fell on the floor laughing. And Abraham said to Elohim, oh, let Ishmael live before you. You see where he was in his heart? There was in his heart doubt, or perhaps a lack of trust in what Yahweh had in mind. The heart doesn't know how to reconcile what is possible based on whose efforts are in question. Our own efforts versus the Almighty's. I'll say that again. The heart doesn't know how to reconcile what is possible. In other words, in your heart, you've got a way of looking at the world and deciding for yourself what you think is possible. Of course, based on your own efforts, you'd probably be right. But we're not dealing with just your efforts here. We're dealing with the Almighty's efforts. And his efforts aren't restricted to what you think is possible. So here's Abraham laughing on the floor, and he's thinking, either on one level he's having a little bit of doubt or a lack of trust in Yahweh, or he just thinks it's funny that this is actually going to happen at 100 years old, and he's going to be a 100-year-old father with a 90-year-old mother, and that this is the plan that the father has. The heart expresses our true thoughts and our true beliefs. Remember, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? That's why we used that verse earlier to kind of lay the table here. Set the table properly where we're going. So the heart expresses our true thoughts and our true beliefs, and truly Abraham thought this was funny. He said, you got to be kidding me, basically. Really? Because look at what he says next. He says, no, let's not do that. Why don't we just use Ishmael? He's already here. We've already got him. This could work. Why can't we do it this way? Any of you ever get caught in that problem? The father has something in mind and you think you're going to tell him, no, why don't we do it this way? Is that a good idea? No. Anybody ever do that? My hand's up. You sit there on your knees, you go, Father, I see what you're trying to do to some degree here, but wouldn't this be easier? Wouldn't it be easier to just do it this other way? Yahweh never said it had to be easy. Because he's going to put you through the wilderness so he can humble you and test you and prove you to see whether it's in your heart to keep the commandments or not. The easy path isn't going to do that. So it's with his purpose in mind that you have a challenging path, a difficult path. Let's go to chapter 20, Bereshit, Genesis chapter 20 and in verse 4. However, Abimelech had not come near her. This is Abraham. Well, we'll go into verse 2 here. Abraham said concerning Sarah, his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, the sovereign of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But Elohim came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, see, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. However, Abimelech said he had not come near her, and he said, Yahweh, would you slay a righteous nation also? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and in the innocence of my hands I have done this. And Elohim said to him in a dream, yea, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, and so I kept you from sinning against me. For this reason I did not let you touch her. So see what happened here? The father allowed this whole process to go through. And as he allowed it to go through, he said to the man, you're a dead man. Look what you've done. He wanted to see how he'd react. How did he react? He said, wait a minute. In fullness of integrity of my heart. In other words, if I had known, I would never have done this. And Yahweh said, that's why I stopped you. Because I know you would have done it. But he also said, for this reason, he said, I did not let you touch her. He says now, verse 7, and now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and let him pray for you, and you live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall certainly die, you and all that is yours. Now he's got him in his place and said, okay, you did this in innocence, out of the integrity of your heart, prove it, let her go. And that's what he did. He rose early in the morning and spoke all these words in the hearing of his servants, and the men were greatly frightened, and he let her go. Now, the reason I use this verse as part of the teaching is that there's an important process here a concept that I want implanted for the rest of the teaching, is the importance of the word integrity in relation to your heart. We need to be doing things in the integrity of our heart. That's going to be an important concept that we're going to talk a lot about as we get through the teaching over the next couple of weeks. Go to chapter 24. We'll stay here in Bereshit in Genesis chapter 24 and in verse 37. Chapter 24, Genesis 24, 37. And my master made me swear, saying, do not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell. So this is the servant of Abraham, sending his servant to go get a wife for his son Isaac, Yitzchak. Okay? And he's saying here, he says, and the master made me swear, saying, do not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I dwell, but go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son. And I said to my master, what if the woman does not follow me? But he said to me, Yahweh, before whom I walk, sends his messenger with you and shall prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then when you go to my relatives, you are to be released from this oath. And if they do not give her to you, then you are released from my oath. And this day I came to the fountain and said, Yahweh Elohim of my master Abraham, please, if you are prospering the way in which I am going, see, I am standing by the fountain of the water, and when the maiden comes out to draw water, and I say to her, please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and she says to me, drink and let me draw for your camels also, let her be the woman whom Yahweh had appointed for my master's son. I had not yet ended speaking in my heart. See, this was him speaking in his heart. Then see, Rivkah was coming out with her jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the fountain to draw water, and I said to her, please let me drink. And she hurried and let her jar down from her shoulder and said, drink and let me water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels too. So now notice the connection here, what's going on here. There was in his heart trust and belief in Abraham's assurance that Yahweh's messenger would be with him and prosper his mission. Remember, this is what Abraham promised him. He said, the messenger of Yahweh will go with you and prosper you in the way that you're going. And so he then says, well, my master told me this is how it's going to work, so I have no idea how to figure this out, so I'll put a little code word here, so to speak. The one that I say this to, if she responds back with this response, that's the one. But notice that he was speaking in his heart. And then no sooner had he stopped the speaking in his heart that exactly the thing happened. Rivka came up to him, and it all played out as it was supposed to play out. Let's go to chapter 27. Let's go to Bereshit, chapter 27, and verse 41. Bereshit, chapter 27, and verse 41. Aren't you finding it interesting that there are people that the thoughts of their heart, the speaking in their heart, the words of their heart, it's interesting how we have the heart speaking. And it doesn't actually surprise us if we know that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 27, and verse 41. And Esau hated Yaakov because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, see here he is saying in his heart, the days of mourning for my father drew near, then I am going to kill my brother Yaakov. Out of the abundance of his heart, he spoke. What was in his heart? Esau wanted to kill his brother. He hated him. He loathed him. He wanted to kill him. So out of the abundance of that heart, he spoke. I'm going to kill him as soon as my father dies. Let's go to Leviticus, Vayikra 19. Leviticus 19 and verse 17. We're going to leave Bereshit for a second. We'll get back to it, but I want to just jump out for a second to go to Leviticus 19 and verse 17. Now, by the way, in verse 1 and 2 it says, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel and say to them, all this stuff that's following that is being spoken on behalf of Yahweh the Almighty. He said, speak to the children. And then we get to verse 17. He says, do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain, and bear no sin because of him. Do you think he had Esau in mind when he gave this instruction? Do not hate your brother in your heart. Why? Because then you want to kill him. Don't we have a commandment against that? Maybe number 6. Do not murder. You see? Let's go back to Bereshit, to Genesis chapter 42. See the consistency of this as we flow through? Bereshit chapter 42 and verse 28. Genesis 42, 28. And he said to his brothers, my silver has been returned, and there it is. It is in my sack, and their hearts sank. Okay, so this is Joseph's brothers. And Joseph had, in verse 25, it commanded that they fill their sacks with grain and also put back every man's silver. And as one of them opened his sack, in verse 27, he saw that the silver was there. And in verse 28, he says, my silver's been returned, and there it is in my in my sack, and their hearts sank. Their hearts sank, and they were afraid, saying to each other, what is this that Elohim has done to us? Notice their approach. They thought that something had happened, that the Almighty had done something to them, that they were reaping something they had sowed. Yahweh will not be mocked. Elohim will not be mocked. You will reap what you sow. And they had already learned this lesson for quite a few years after what had happened with Joseph. They knew they had been suffering for all of those years that he was gone. Of course, they thought he was long gone and dead. They didn't know what had happened to him. And they had suffered. And they were finally coming to the place where they had realized why they had suffered. And now they're suffering some more, and they're still not, they're like, what do we need to do to fix this finally? What do we need to do to set this thing straight? And their heart sank. You see, because out of the abundance of their heart, they threw him in a pit, Joseph. Out of the abundance of their heart, out of their jealousies and their anger and their bitterness, they sold him into slavery. And their heart, they knew, was still not right. And their heart sank. They were trying to figure out how to bring the heart back and restore it back into the presence of the Almighty, where they will be restored and forgiven. Chapter 45 and verse 26. Still here in Genesis and Bereshit 45 and in verse 26. This is our last verse in Bereshit. In verse 26 it says, and they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive. They're talking to Yaakov. Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Yaakov's heart ceased. It skipped a beat. It stopped for a second there, for he did not believe them. See how belief and the heart kind of play together? When their heart sank, they knew that in their heart they had believed that they had not done everything to set things straight. They knew they were still in trouble. They hadn't made proper repentance. And here, after all that had happened, Yaakov could not even believe this. He also, I think, he knew he couldn't trust his children. He knew he couldn't trust these children. And I think deep down he knew they'd been telling him stories for years that weren't necessarily true. And here they are telling him another one that just seemed too great to believe. Joseph is alive. Not only is he alive, he's the governor of all of Egypt. Come on. He's like, if you're going to make up a story, at least make up one that's sort of plausible. I mean, there was no way. His son was missing for all of those years. They had said that he was eaten by an animal. They'd brought them the torn, bloody, coat. And now they're going to tell him, oh no, he's alive. And not only that, he runs the entire nation of Egypt. That's a little bit too much, and the old man couldn't swallow it. His heart actually stopped. He was like, because I think he felt that this was more than he could handle. Don't tease an old man like that. Let's go to Shemot. Let's go into Exodus now. Shemot 4 and verse 21. Shemot chapter 4 and in verse 21. Now, as we get into Exodus, I want to say something sort of to set the table correctly here. We're going to read, when we get to the plagues in Pharaoh, and actually a lot of places, we're going to read certain things from here all the way to the end of Deuteronomy that Yahweh says over and over again. And some of you may sit there going, yeah, you read that already. Yeah, I know, you read that already. But guess what? He wrote it all those times for a reason. So we're going to read it multiple times, as he says it multiple times, because it was something you were supposed to embrace the importance of, the meaning of, the lesson in. That's why he said it so many times. I've seen people get so in my face over something that Scripture says once. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong to do necessarily, but yet the things that Scripture says maybe 20, 30, 50 times, it's not even a thought in their head. I don't know about you, but I think if it's said 20, 30, 50 times, it may be more important than the thing that I think is said once. Maybe I'm just wrong about that. So we're going to go through this and read a lot of things over and over again because he says it over and over again. And so if you get bored and upset about it, well, I'm sorry, but that's your problem, not mine. He said it over and over and over again. Is that okay? As I'm sitting here saying, it's your problem, I'm being not so gentle, but let's be frank about this. He said it, I'm just reading it, right? So we're going to get that a lot here when we get to Pharaoh. Now, Shemot chapter 4 and in verse 21, Exodus 4 and verse 21. And Yahweh said to Moshe, as you go back to Mitzrayim, see that you do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in your hand, but I am going to harden his heart so that he does not let the people go. How do you like those instructions? Here's Moses. He didn't want to go in the first place. And he's told, look, I want you to go, and you're going to go and bring my people out of Egypt. And after all of that arm twisting, Moses is finally like, okay, I guess I have no choice. I'm going to go. And then Yahweh says, oh, and by the way, not so simple. I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart so that he doesn't let them go. And Moses is thinking, I didn't even want to do this. Why are you going to make this so hard? And we're going to see there's a reason. Now, let's take the word there where it says he hardened his heart. There's a better definition here for that word. The idea for the word hardened is better translated, strengthened it where it was already set. So, because we can get the wrong impression that, man, Pharaoh just wanted to let him go. No, he didn't. He didn't really want to. He felt forced to. He felt like he was given no choice to. But until the Father had done what he wanted to do all the signs and wonders, which we had learned when we did the Passover. If you remember when we did the Passover, we talked about how each one of the plagues laid into waste, into mockery, the different deities of Egypt. And he needed to show that all of their gods were of nothing. Because remember, these people had been spending hundreds of years under that system. The Israelites had been in that system. And they needed to have absolutely no shadow of doubt that those stone and wood and everything else idols were of nothing. They could do nothing. There was no power in them. And so you had attacks on the god of night, the god of the sun, the god of the crops, the god of the waters. All of them were attacked by the plagues and shown to have no power. And so, no, he wasn't going to have him do one sign and wonder and have Pharaoh just collapse on the floor and say, good, get out of here, go. He needed to bring judgment. He said, I will bring judgment on the nation. So part of his bringing judgment was in strengthening the heart of Pharaoh in the direction it already wanted to be. In other words, he gave him resolve in his position. Does that sound more, does it make more sense? Okay, then hardening his heart. And that's what the Hebrew actually means. The Hebrew actually means a strengthening in that direction. So now let's continue in chapter 7 and in verse 3. We're staying in Shemot in Exodus chapter 7 and in verse 3. But I am going to harden the heart of Pharaoh and shall increase my signs and my wonders in the land of Mitzrayim. So here he says it again. He's reminding, he says in verse 1, he says, So Yahweh said to Moshe, See, I have made you Elohim to Pharaoh, a God to Pharaoh. And Aaron, your brother, is your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and Aaron, your brother, shall speak to Pharaoh, to let the children of Israel go out of his land. But I'm going to strengthen his heart in the direction he really wants to go, and shall increase my signs and my wonders in the land of Mitzrayim. Because why? Because the father had a plan that had to be completed before he's going to let him go. Let's go to verse 13. Verse 13, same chapter 7 of Exodus, Shemot, Exodus chapter 7, verse 13. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had said. And Yahweh said to Moshe, The heart of Pharaoh is hard, he refuses to let the people go. Isn't that funny? Yahweh had strengthened his heart, had hardened his heart, and then he says to Moses, he says, Look, Moses, the heart of Pharaoh is hard. So now go to Pharaoh in the morning and do the next thing I have for you to do. Now remember, he was also preparing Moses. I don't think we always think about that. Moses was going to have enough issues and enough troubles once they got out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim, that he had to put Moses through some really tough paces here in Egypt. I mean, Moses, are you willing to go before the authority who could just basically have you killed at any moment and just say, enough of this, kill him, and get in that sovereign, that king, that Pharaoh's face, and tell him, let the people go, and then do signs and wonders, which is only going to get him more mad at you, as you create all these plagues, as you are the conduit for the plagues that torture this nation. He was putting Moses through his paces to test him, to prove him, to see whether it was in his heart to do the commandments or not. Remember what happened with a guy named, Jonah? He was given a similar mission. Yahweh said, I'm going to send you to a people. I want you to say something. Was it in Jonah's heart to do that? No. Was it in Moses' heart initially to do that? No. Jonah wasn't given quite the mission that Moses was, though. He said, go there and tell them to repent. And they repented. That was the end of it for Jonah. That was easy, all things considered. Moses had a much bigger deal to go on his hands. He was going to have about 2 to 3 million people to deal with in the desert for a while. And so Yahweh really needed to know, not because Yahweh was doubting. He wanted to prove, to see, to humble, to know that it was in Moses' heart, once he got him through the paces, that he had the strength to now go through the process. Does that make sense? Okay, so Yahweh was actually putting Moses through his paces here. Look at verse 22 and 23. We're still in Exodus chapter 7. And the magicians of Mitzrayim made the same with their magic. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had said. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and his heart was not moved by this either. So here, we have to remember, the magicians did exactly what Moses had done. For the first couple of plagues they did. And so because of that, and Yahweh allowed the magicians to do that. And what did it do? It strengthened the Pharaoh in his resolve. Oh, well, my magicians could do it, so how powerful is your God? How powerful is your Elohim? I think my magicians just did the same thing. And notice that this is going on in his heart. He said, he turned and went into his house, and his heart was not moved. See, these things are supposed to move your heart. That's why we have signs and wonders. These things are there to move your heart. Let's go to chapter 8 and verse 12. Chapter 8, Shemot, Exodus chapter 8 and in verse 12. And Moshe and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moshe cried out to Yahweh concerning the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And Yahweh did according to the word of Moshe, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. And when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened, or he strengthened his heart, and did not listen to them as Yahweh had said. And Yahweh said to Moshe, say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land so that it becomes gnats in all the land of Mitzrayim, Egypt. And they did so, and Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth, and it became gnats on the man and beast. All the dust of the land became gnats in all the land of Mitzrayim. And the magicians did similarly with their magic to bring forth gnats, but they were unable. And there were gnats on man and beast. See, here at this point, now they're unable. They tried to do it and they were unable. The magicians then say to Pharaoh, verse 19, this is the finger of Elohim. So here even the magicians are going, look, this really is the great, this is Elohim. And Pharaoh said, his heart was hardened, his heart was strengthened, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had said. Let's go to verse 31, same chapter. Chapter 8 and verse 31. And Yahweh did according to the word of Moshe and removed the swarms of flies from the Pharaoh and from his servants and from his people. Not one remained, but Pharaoh hardened his heart and at this time too, and did not let the people go. Notice that it no longer says Yahweh's doing it. Pharaoh's doing it all on his own now. After all, he was able to survive the first couple of plagues and harden his heart. They had lived through it. So now he's hardening it on his own. It said, but Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time too, and he did not let the people go. Chapter 9 and verse 7. Chapter 9 and verse 7. By the way, what else is happening during all these plagues? Not only is Egypt being destroyed, Mitzrayim being destroyed, but Yisrael is seeing signs and wonders. Yisrael is getting the fear of Elohim brought into their hearts. Yisrael is seeing the signs and wonders which are supposed to draw you into faith, into belief. That's the purpose of signs and wonders. Chapter 9 and in verse 7. Then Pharaoh sent, and see, not even one of the livestock of Israelites was dead, but the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. So now Yisrael is being protected from the plagues. They're being protected at this point. He says, and Yahweh, verse 8, said to Moshe and Aaron, fill your hands with ashes from a furnace, and let Moshe scatter it toward the heavens before the eyes of Pharaoh. And it shall become fine dust in all the land of Mitzrayim, and shall cause boils that break out in sores on man and beast in all the land of Egypt. So they took ashes from the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses scattered them toward the heavens, and they caused boils breaking out in sores on man and beast. And the magicians were unable to stand before Moshe because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and in all the Mitzrites, all the Egyptians. But Yahweh hardened the heart of the Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them as Yahweh had said to Moshe. And Yahweh said to Moshe, rise early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh and say to him, thus said Yahweh, Elohim of the Hebrews, let my people go so that they serve me. For at this time I am sending all my plagues onto your heart. This is how he worded it this time. I am sending all my plagues onto your heart and on your servants and on your people, so that you know that there is no one like me in all the earth. Now if I had stretched out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, then you would have been cut off from the earth. And for this reason I have raised you up, in order to show you my power, in order to declare my name in all the earth. You still exalt yourself against my people in that you do not let them go. Look, he's even explaining to Pharaoh, look, I put you there. I put you there for a reason. Don't ever get it in your head that you're somehow a mighty one yourself. I put you there. He says, for this reason I have raised you up, in order to show you my power, in order to declare my name in all the earth. Yet you still exalt yourself against my people, and that you do not let them go. Verse 18, see, tomorrow about this time I am causing very heavy hail to rain down, such as not been in Mitzrayim in Egypt from the day of its founding until now. Now listen to what happens in verse 19. Interesting. And now bring your livestock to safety, and all that you have in the field, for the hail shall come down on every man and every beast which is found in the field, and is not brought home, and they shall die. So he actually gives them instruction. Those among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of Yahweh, see, it was starting to work on Egyptians. This is why you ended up with a mixed multitude coming out of Egypt, because some of them were getting it. Here's some of them right here in verse 20. It says, those among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of Yahweh made their servants and livestock flee to the houses. But those that did not set their heart, listen to it now, see? Those in Egypt who had set their heart to listen, he says, those that did not set their heart on the word of Yahweh left their servants and livestock in the field. We all know what happened to them. They died. Let's continue here in verse 31, same chapter. And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the head. Actually, I'm in the wrong place here. I jumped back in my notes. Verse 33, same chapter. Verse 33. And Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and spread out his hands to Yahweh, and the thunder and the hail ceased, and the rain was not poured on the earth. And Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, yet he had sinned again, and he strengthened or hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the children of Israel go, as Yahweh had said through Moshe. Now, before we go any further, this is where that starts to get in there. I know you keep reading this, and the plague happened, and he hardened his heart, and the plague happened. Look, are things not happening in your life, and you realize that maybe Yahweh's involved, but then you strengthen your heart and the resolve to the way you want to go? And then something happens in your life, and you kind of soften up a little bit, but no, you strengthen again your heart, or you harden your heart in the way that you want to go, because you don't want to get off the throne. Can you not see examples of this in your life? Where signs and wonders start. Have any of you had signs and wonders happen in your life? Yet, is there still issues where you do not allow those signs and wonders to truly create the fear of Yahweh that you need? Any hands for that? Yes. Because we're just like Pharaoh. Remember, Pharaoh is king. He's sitting on his throne. You've got a Pharaoh in your throne. You. And the Pharaoh named you, fill in your name, Pharaoh whatever, needs to get off the throne and stop hardening your heart. Because this is sin. It says here, he said here, we just read in the verse that it was sin. It said, yet he sinned again in verse 34, and he hardened his heart, and he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the children of Israel go. It's almost like Yahweh is saying to you, let and fill in your name, go. You're his child. Your child is in slavery to you, to self-sovereignty. He's trying to get you to set that person free. Why? That person, which is you, needs to be free to serve his Creator with all his heart and with all his strength and with all his being, as we read in Deuteronomy 10:12. And you've got to set that captive free. Let's go to chapter 10 and in verse 1. Let's see if I can finish getting through Exodus before we stop today. Chapter 10 and in verse 1. We're still in Shemot. And Yahweh said to Moshe, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, so that I show these signs of mine before him. See, there's a purpose. I've hardened them, I've strengthened them in their resolve. Why? So that I can show my signs before them, and that you relate in the hearing of your son and your son's son what I have done in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, and you shall know that I am Yahweh. See, he did all this so that we would be reading this and telling each other about it. That was the purpose. And Moshe and Aaron, verse 3, came in to Pharaoh and said to him, Thus said Yahweh, Elohim of the Hebrews, till when shall you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go so that they serve me. Or else if you refuse to let my people go, see, tomorrow I am bringing locusts within your border. So here comes another plague. Now at this point, do you think that Pharaoh understood that if he didn't listen, the stuff was probably going to happen? I'm going to guess that Pharaoh knew that it was probably going to happen. But his resolve to stay on his throne and not submit to any other authority wouldn't allow him to do what he was supposed to do. Guess what? We fall into that same place. Because you know certain things that you do are going to bring certain reactions from the Almighty. You know you're going to reap what you're going to sow, and you do it anyway, because you just don't want to get off the throne. Because I got to believe at this point, when Moses says, look, or else if you refuse, I'm going to bring locusts. I think at this point, there was a pretty good chance that the servants of Pharaoh knew locusts were coming. Everything else had come. Why would he all of a sudden not get it? But he was stubborn, and so are we. And he was stiff-necked, and so are we. And he was just not going to get off the throne. Because if he had let the people go, he would have basically told the world, I'm no longer in charge. I'm no longer king. There's a higher authority. And guess what, folks? There is a higher authority. And that was the whole point of all this, to teach us there's a higher authority. Verse 27, we'll stay here in chapter 10, Shemot 10 and verse 27. However, Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he would not let them go. And Pharaoh said to him, Get away from me. Watch yourself and see my face no more, for in the day you see my face, you die. And Moshe said, You have spoken rightly. Never again do I see your face. So here, at this point now, Pharaoh's just had enough. Pharaoh's now drawing a line saying, look, you know what? If you come back here again, I will kill you. But was Pharaoh going to actually change? No way. No way. Shemot 14 and verse 4. Exodus 14 and verse 4. Shemot 14 and in verse 4. And I shall harden the heart of Pharaoh and shall pursue them, but I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh and over all his army, and the Mitzrites shall know that I am Yahweh, and they did so. Remember, part of this is also so the Egyptians would know that he is Yahweh. And verse 5, and it says, And it was reported to the sovereign of Mitzrayim, the king of Egypt, that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people. And they said, Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? So he made his chariot ready and took his people with him. More signs and wonders needed to happen. So he was now going to go after them. Verse 8. And Yahweh hardened the heart of Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and he pursued the children of Israel, but the children of Israel went out defiantly. Verse 17. And I am hardening the hearts of the Mitzrites, and they shall follow them, and I am to be esteemed through Pharaoh over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. Because if this had not happened, we never get the parting of the sea. We never get to stand still and see the deliverance. We never get to see them between that rock and a hard place. That's a great metaphor for everything that happens in our life when we feel like we're between that rock and a hard place. Now, he knew he was going to do that. He knew where they were headed. But he needed them to have that happen. Now, notice what it says here. He was preventing them from going out in the desert to serve Yahweh. In Romans 6:16, we have, You are servants to the one whom you obey. You see, that's the problem. We are servants either way. They served Pharaoh. They were going to be set free to serve Yahweh. But you are a servant to whoever you obey. Pharaoh was still a servant to what? Self-sovereignty. To himself. To his own heart. He was a slave to it. He couldn't see past it. Remember we talked about earlier that somehow it's going to cloud your vision, those emotions of that heart, and affect your decisions? That was exactly what was happening with Pharaoh. Let's go to Shemot chapter 28, last verse in Shemot, chapter 28 and verse 3. And you speak to all the wise of heart, whom I fill with the spirit of wisdom, and they shall make garments of Aaron to set him apart for him to serve as priest to me. And I'm going to use this transitionally as we're going to go into something totally different now, as we're going to go into next week, is that after they got out, and after they went into the desert, we now start dealing with those that are wise of heart. We're now starting to learn what it's like to be on the other side of this. And he said, all those whom I filled with the spirit of wisdom, those who are wise of heart, he says, they shall make the garments for Aaron. And we have in Psalm 111 in verse 10, the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. They should have learned as they were coming out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, to fear Yahweh. And the fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. And then we get to this verse in Shemot, it says, and get those ones who have that fear of Yahweh, who have the wisdom of heart, and ask them to do these things. And so that's where we're going to transition here. We're going to end there this week, and we're going to continue as we go through into the book of Leviticus and Numbers, etc. We go through all this, trying to get to the heart of the matter. Because that's going to be something that's going to, I believe, really increase your ability to recognize what your issues are, what the true issues are in your walk, where the stumbling blocks are in your walk, where the stiff-necked stuff comes from, where the hard-headed stuff comes from. It's going to be that it's a heart issue. Let's go before the Father. Father, we come before you to bless you and to praise you and give glory to your name. Father, we do want to get to the heart of the matter. We don't want to be like Pharaoh sitting on his throne. Father, help us to recognize where we are really the problem in our own lives more than any other issue. It's self-sovereignty and doing what we desire and what we want and putting it above what you desire and what you want. So, Father, give us hearts that will be submissive to you. Give us hearts full of wisdom, full of the fear of you. That's an awe and abiding respect, a fear of disappointing and letting you down. Father, give us a heart to seek after you, to serve you, a heart that loves you with all of our strength, with all of our being, with all that is of us, with every ounce of our being. Father, to desire to serve you with all of our heart and with all of our being, all of our strength. Father, help us to truly embrace and understand what the heart issues are. Father, we love you, we praise you. We want the heart of Yeshua. We want the heart to be beating in us that was the same that beat in him. Father, one that was completely in submission to you. Submission and in obedience to you, loving you with everything, so that we can be transformed and conformed to the image of your Son. Father, we thank you and we praise you and ask these things in the name of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen and amen. 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 Amen.